work application. We do have it on our website.
Mhm.
So if you go to like our social work homepage, there's a little social work application, and it's really just like the gist of it is, why do you want to do social work? And that's one of our CSWE requirements. But in the meantime, I wanted to see, have you ever heard of this lady?
Mm-mm.
She is awesome. Have you gotten anything on trauma yet in any of your classes?
Not yet.
Okay. Besides mine, I hit it on it really hard. There's a lot of stuff in social work about it. Sometimes this cuts me off the live stream because of the TED Talk noise, but I think I skipped that part, and I want you guys.
In the 90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed.
I like her intro.
Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy.
That's crazy.
And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in North California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview, Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle, and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities: access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of the numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then
Sure. So if you guys have never heard of this lady, it's Dr. Nadine Harris Burke, and she is a medical doctor with like a specialty in ACEs, childhood trauma. She's now the Surgeon General of California too. So she's big news, but her whole talk here breaks down everything about how childhood trauma affects with psychology, criminal justice, social work, and sociology. If we have too many ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, our life is cut short by 20 years. So men now only live on average to age 73. That would cut me out in 9 years. I'll die at 53 if I don't address my ACEs or adverse childhood experiences. And then women live to about 80 something, so it would cut them out to die at 60. But she's saying if we do address it, you can get back to normal life expectancy. And there's so much research on it. It started about 20 years ago.
I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health schools is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, Dr. Burke, have you seen this? In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Anda at the CDC, and together they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1/8, had 4 or more ACEs.
So the ACEs, again, are adverse childhood experiences. So either physical trauma, psychological trauma, even a sexual trauma, or even like a parent with mental health disorder. Divorce is one of them. So that's the most common. About 60% of us have experienced a divorce.
The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was an ACE score of 7 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, you know, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. So your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information threw my old training out the window, because when we understand the mechanism of a disease, prevention and treatment, that's what we do. So in San Francisco, we created the Center for Youth Wellness to prevent, screen, and heal the impacts of ACEs and toxic stress. We started simply with routine screening of every one of our kids at their regular physical, because I know that if my patient has an ACE score of 4, she's 2.5 times as likely to develop hepatitis or COPD. She's 4.5 times as likely to become depressed, and she's 12 times as likely to attempt to take her own life as my patient with 0 ACEs. I know that when she's in my exam room. For our patients who do screen positive, we have a multidisciplinary treatment team that works to reduce the dose of adversity and treat symptoms using best practices, including home visit, care coordination, mental health care, nutrition, holistic interventions, and yes, medication when necessary. But we also educate parents about the impact of ACEs and toxic stress the same way you would for covering electrical outlets or lead poisoning. And we tailor the care of our asthmatics and our diabetics in a way that recognizes that they may need more aggressive treatment given the changes to their hormonal and immune systems. So the other thing that happens when you understand this science is that you want to shout it from the rooftops, because this isn't just an issue for kids in Bayview. I figured the minute that everybody else heard about this, it would be routine screening, your multidisciplinary treatment teams, and it would be a race to the most effective clinical treatment protocols. Yeah, that did not happen. And that was a huge learning for me. What I had thought of as simply best clinical practice, I now understand to be a movement. In words of Dr. Robert Block, the former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today. And for a lot of people, that's a terrifying prospect. The scope and scale of the problem seems so large that it feels overwhelming to think about how we might approach. When we have the right framework, when we exist to be a public health crisis, then we can begin to use the right toolkit to come up with solutions. From tobacco to lead poisoning to HIV/AIDS, the United States actually has quite a strong track record with addressing public health problems. But replicating those successes with ACEs and toxic stress is going to take determination and commitment. And when I look at what our nation's response has been so far, I wonder, why haven't we taken this more seriously? You know, at first, I thought that we marginalized the issue because it doesn't apply to us, right? That's an issue for those kids in those neighborhoods, which is weird because the data doesn't bear that out. The original ACEs study was done in a population that was 70% Caucasian, 70% college educated. But then, the more I talk to folks, I'm beginning to think that maybe I had it completely backwards. If I were to ask how many people in this room grew up with a family member who suffered from mental illness, I bet a few hands would go up. And then if I were to ask how many folks had a parent who maybe drank too much, or who really believed that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child, I bet a few more hands would go up. Even in this room, this is an issue that touches many of us. And I'm beginning to believe that we marginalize the issue because it does apply to us. Maybe it's easier to see in other zip codes because we don't want to look at it. We'd rather be sick. Fortunately, scientific advances and frankly, economic realities make that option less viable every day. The science is clear. Early adversity dramatically affects health across a lifetime. Today, we are beginning to understand how to interrupt the progression from early adversity to disease and early death. And 30 years from now, the child who has a high ACE score and whose behavioral symptoms go unrecognized, whose asthma management is not connected, and who goes on to develop high blood pressure and early heart disease or cancer will be just as anomalous as a 6-month mortality from HIV/AIDS. People will look at that situation and say, what the heck happened there? This is treatable. This is beatable. The single most important thing that we need today is the courage to look this problem in the face and say, this is real, and this is all of us. I believe that we are the movement. Thank you.
All right, so this was a TED Talk. It's about trauma and adverse childhood experiences. Stream has been paused. Definitely an important one to use because I think Dr. Nadine Burke breaks it down the best and explains what's going on with adverse childhood experiences. What do you guys think? Have you ever heard of ACEs or adverse childhood experiences or anything like that? So what class have you gotten them in?
I believe I came across that one in my psychology classes.
Right. Okay. So does it make sense, or is it like 20 years less on your life? Yes.
I can't relate. So what is early?
Adverse childhood experiences are, let's see if I want to make sure as I've shown it in some, so ACES 1997. This was the first study done, and there's a lot of research done on ACEs. Specifically, there's 10 things that they rate. So it could be anything from divorce to physical abuse to mental and emotional abuse. And I think this one also gives a good breakdown of it. So let me show you that too. Hopefully this answers for you. Because we're putting a lot of funding into this. So a lot of social work jobs are out of.
This is my neighborhood. I grew up in this building. This is a great community now, but it's had its share of problems. When I was a kid, our community had high unemployment, a lack of resources for families, and lots of kids hanging out with no adult supervision. You might have heard about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and neglect, that can increase risk for future problems. But they don't have to. The good news is that ACEs and their consequences can be prevented. Take me, for example. I was at risk for ACEs, and despite all the things that put me at risk, some pretty incredible people helped make sure that I wouldn't become another statistic. Come on, I'll show you around. That's Jackson. He's a cool kid. His dad left when he was 2, and his mom works 2 jobs. I hang out with him every Thursday night and help him with his homework. Sometimes we grab ice cream. It's fun. Plus, he has another adult role model to learn from and trust. That's Mr. Martino. When I was a kid, he let me help him at the store sometimes after school when my parents were working late. He did that for a bunch of us. My dad actually found his job as a mechanic because of Mr. Martino. This helped our family in so many ways. Not only did my dad have a steady paycheck, which eased his stress about paying rent and buying necessities like food and clothes, but he was also a lot nicer to me, my brother, and my mom once he started working a job that made him feel good about himself. When communities come together, they can do so much to prevent ACEs. Mr. Martino and other local business owners put together a series of career workshops to help people like my dad find work. My mom also got a job with a company that allowed her to work from home and spend more time with me and my brother. Mariana has just gotten out of a class about handling challenges of single parenting. The clinic offers free childcare so Mariana's daughter, Ella, can play while Mariana's in class. The class helps parents like Mariana develop positive parenting skills, not just for babies and toddlers, but for teenagers too. This is another way our community has come together to give families the resources they need, and just one more way to prevent ACEs. This was my school, Riverside Middle, right in the heart of town. These kids are here for a sponsored summer camp. This community-supported program helps families with affordable, quality childcare and helps kids get tutoring and learn life skills. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at this school all year long. There was one counselor, Miss Greer, who I remember more than anyone. She was a really good listener. Miss Greer helped me and my brother get involved in after-school activities like baseball and soccer. Our coaches were super nice and were mentors to us. Staying after school for practice kept us and a lot of other kids out of trouble. When schools help take responsibility for preventing ACEs, everybody wins. My life could have gone in a completely different direction. Studies show that ACEs can have long-term negative effects on kids' health and well-being that may last into adulthood. Studies show that ACEs can have long-term negative effects on kids' health and well-being that may lack action. ACEs can be prevented. Stop ACEs before you start. You can implement them in your own community, just parents and positive parenting, by providing quality care and by intervening to less harm and prevent future risk. So, now you know my story, and you've seen the prevention strategies in my community that helped me beat the odds. Relationships with my family and friends, I learned how to take care of kids who need.
So I like that into the ways we can avoid the harms from ACEs. Does that help make more sense? So they're pretty common. Like most of us have like 1, 2, or 3 of them. They say when you get more than 4 or 5, which I certainly have, it's important to address them. Go talk to somebody. Go, it's okay for psychologists and social workers to see a social worker. And there's, as you can see, a lot of funding going from the government because of this. She's one of the first ones that comes up, and it is copyrighted, so they'll probably make me cut that part out of the video. But it's Dr. Nadine Burke, and there's a lot of medical research on it. We focus on it in psychology and social work fields because of all the stuff that comes after that's a challenge. So what do you guys think? I just want to kind of get a discussion going from it. And are they important to take care of? And
what's the process like to take care of?
Mainly seeing a therapist and being able to talk. It could be a sensory-based intervention. The blowing glass model that I showed you is apparently one of them that they're using in Chicago. Horticulture therapy is another one that they're using. Sometimes just cognitive behavioral therapy and talk therapy. it's easy to skip taking care of it too. Is it's easy to say I don't want to talk about it because it's deep stuff, tough stuff. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather not talk about. I like how Dr. Nadine Berg gets into the details, like how many had a family member with mental illness, how many had a divorce in the family, how many had a parent who thought if you spared the rod, you spoiled the child, you know, like getting hit with the belt or something, which was pretty common when I was growing up. So it's a little bit then, but you know, ACEs are very common. You can take the test yourself if you just Google like ACEs free online test. And they kind of, there's several that, well, those are the videos. But if you just go into all searches, there's several that give you the ACEs quiz and learn what it does. What's that?
Can we take it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to know,
Like you want to do it.
classified as ACE.
Right, yeah, to show you which ones. So here's a good pictograph of it too. So like these 10 things: abuse, physical, emotional, or sexual; neglect, either physical or emotional; and even possible household dysfunction; mental illness, incarcerated relative; mother was treated violently; even substance abuse or divorce. So there's like the 10. Most of us have 2, 3, or 4. Like it's very, very common. Here's some other ones. Lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, and missed work; physical and mental health, obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempt. They've done research on all of these. More likely to have an STD, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and even broken bones. And yeah, I wouldn't want to do the test publicly here because we all have our own personal things, and your level of wanting to share is okay too. But if you take it, you would do it here. There's several of them where they just like offer a click through. So you can just like go to,
No,
what's that?
I was, the other,
What's that?
I was, the other, pictograph.
Explained it better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I understand.
So what do you guys think? Like in terms of social workers, why do they give so much research to this stuff now?
It's a issue. It's very common.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, a lot of us have it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very like preventative.
It is, yeah, and fixable, like beatable
Right.
if you go talk to a person. This is one of the group games that we've also used in our groups class. How many of you guys will take like social work practice 2 class? Is that, it would be social work majors. What's your major again? So it's practice courses where you learn how to, practice 1 is learning how to work with individuals. Practice 2 is how to like run a group and lead a mental health group. And then practice 3 is like even political advocacy interventions is like the point of it. And this was like a group game we use in the groups one that's for nonviolent communication and learning about nonviolent communication. So yeah, she is now the Surgeon General. Because when I started showing this video, it came out in like 16. Obviously, it's strong enough they've copyrighted it. And lots of stuff that are going up. Let's see if I can. Somebody asked for the link of the class online. So also our midterms are due tomorrow. And what that looks like is like the second paper last night. And I also give you guys a grace period to turn it in. So if you didn't get it in at midnight last night, you could still turn it in. Midterms aren't permanent. They just kind of show like your progress and like things that could be turned around. So if you're still working on it, you could turn it in tonight. Yeah. Did you get your stuff back?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
I just want to make sure I'm still good to turn in.
Yeah, you can turn it in. Totally. Yeah. But everybody's okay and safe and whatever. Okay, good. But it looks like it's a little bit crazy up there. And I don't know. Is it maybe the way? Is that your hometown or you?
I was with my friend. That's his hometown.
So yeah, you guys can still turn it in. It goes to an automatic 0 the day it's due, but I'll still take stuff. So that's why if you see it, it'll pop up that way. But that is, let's see here. Do you guys have any questions? I think Aces is thick enough. It's something to definitely contemplate. More presentations. I love when they make you update your computer every week. Something they like close everything inside of your stuff. So we are not Ashford. We are actually called PowerPoint 11. Interesting. So no questions on. Soon we're going to get into this social work and poverty, homelessness, and unemployment. We'll have a lot of stuff going on there. But as of right now, I feel like we're actually on seven. So downloads. They keeping you guys crazy in your other classes so far? 6. That's always fun. This might be the one. I feel like this is what we just finished, so I'm going to open this one. If it wants to open. Yes. All right. So we just finished social work and social justice. The last paper was on the code of ethics and different ways we do that. But then we're going to start dipping into 7 because we're like halfway there about diversity and kind of the breakdowns of diversity and social work. It's more next week. But I did want to give you guys some time for those of you that do have to get your midterms in before tomorrow. An observation assignment, and that's coming up next. So I'll put that one in for 1100 right here. So right out of the syllabus, we've done 1 and 2. Oh yeah, we're doing the international social work paper. So you've done social work as a career, values assignment due right now before the midterm. Then after the midterm, global social work paper and field observation. So this next one is a little bit longer, but it will get into, I always kind of dumb it down on the instructions for you guys. So if you're doing the next paper, you look up the International Federation of Social Work and look up the National Association of Social Work, write a paper on the organizations, description of them and purpose and mission. Also looking into some of the international like Peace Corps. Have you guys ever heard of the Peace Corps? And then Jesuit Volunteer Corps. So those are some of the international ones you could do. Like I lived in El Salvador and I lived in Nicaragua, and that's why I got interested in the social work to begin with. These folks make you want to have islands in 1968. And there is a lot of stuff. So these are usually for college grads. We have
I want
AmeriCorps,
volunteers to know.
if it works. AmeriCorps is for when you finish high school. You can do that before you jump into the field.
Us to know that we are so excited to see them again or to meet them for the first time. Peace Corps is here. When I say Peace Corps, I'm talking about Peace Corps as a whole. I'm talking about headquarters. I'm talking about post staff. I'm talking about our community partners. I'm talking about our host families. We are all here, and we're really excited to collaborate with them and have them form part of our team.
The communities where we've worked in for so many years are really ready to see volunteers come back, and they understand the importance and the connections that have been made. That's where our heart and soul is at.
Bueno, pues contaba que de las cosas que esperamos para los nuevos voluntarios es el desarrollo de capacidades tanto a nivel de las organizaciones en lo que es el área de negocio, que Cuerpo de Paz tiene muy bien definido ese proceso de transformación y de formación en jóvenes.
So that's the
También la consolidación.
Dominican. They have places all over the island. Sounds kind of funny. It was the 60s. A lot of times you're working in communities for like development, bringing them medical clinics, prevention, and, oh yeah, computers. A lot of times it is organic farming and like construction stuff. And like teaching English. So that's like a big one. Beekeeping, I guess. So similarly, IFSW has a few of those. Why am I? Okay, there it is. And it's descriptions. You could take their definition from the website, but here's what they are in a minute and a half.
In the past, I have missed my so many moments.
Not the ladies' advertisement, but this is not the ladies' advertisement, but this is what IFSW is. Connected to the
Social workers are
NASW.
dedicated to enhancing human well-being and helping meet the basic needs of all people. Social work has been around for more than a century. Our profession has been instrumental in pushing for major social reforms, including Social Security, the minimum wage, and equal rights for minorities, women, and people who are LGBTQIA. We need social workers now more than ever. Today, social work professionals are tackling issues that include income equality, access to health care, and care for our aging population. Social work is one of the fastest growing professions in the country. There are more than 100,000 social workers in the United States, and that number is expected to rise to almost 800,000 by the year 2028. Substance abuse treatment, healthcare, family and children's services, aging, in schools, and in local, state, and federal government. Learn more about the life-changing support that social workers provide at Help Starts Here.
So there's quite a few that break down what you do on salaries, like see how much they make. What do you guys think a normal social worker would make?
50,000,
That sounds about right
60,000.
if you added the masters on. So do your bachelor's, 1 year masters, or if it's 2, like me, because I didn't get a bachelor's in social work, it was psychology. My first job was $24,000 a year, but that was in 2006. Somebody said, if you get a license, we'll pay you 50% more. So I got $35,000 a year. Then when I got my independent license, I got $42,000 a year. That was in like 2009. Then I got a supervision credential. It was like $49,000 a year. I left that agency because their insurance was too much. And then teaching, NKU was like $46,000 a year. Miami University was like $48,000 a year. Here they started me at like $50,000, but when the pandemic we cut 5%, it was like $47,500. And then you can like see clients on the side in private practice for say $35 a billable hour. So if you were like billing the whole time, $35 a billable hour. So if you're like billing the whole time, you can make a lot, but usually you're expected to see 20 clients a week. If it is 35 hours a week, that or $35 an hour for 20 a week is what's that?
35 hours, 35 months.
30. If you some do 35 clients a week for $35 an hour. Now, if you do that, you'll make like 60,000. And often they'll pay you more when you're independently licensed, like 40 an hour or 45 an hour. And some people see 30 clients a week, which is a lot. That's like 5 a day or 6 a day. So the salaries are the most interesting to me. VA pays you a lot, like 60,000. They often require a independent license, and then hospice lately has been paying 68,000. If you're a fresh MSW, LSW, if you have your license and a master of social work, they'll start you at 68,000 where I am. And then teaching is always paid a little bit lower, but that's what, when you write the paper, looking up all the different salaries and jobs, and not just the generic one, you know how you can like Google it, and salary.com will say the average social worker will make 60,000 is okay, but in New York, you would starve to death. If you make 60,000 in Ohio, you're balling. You're like making tons of money in Ohio and the Midwest. But if you're New York and even Chicago and LA, it's hard to live off that. So sometimes doing a scan of what all the monthlies are. And I think Chicago lets you get a social work license just if you have a degree. So you don't even need to take the test there anymore, which is kind of cool. Anybody from Chicago though? Close to it? So we try to get you guys ready for your license and everything, but that's kind of the gist of it. Any other questions about money? How much can you make? How fast can you finish? We have somebody else finishing in 3.5 years again, which is kind of cool. Like if you did 18 every semester, what is that like? Yeah. 36 every year. And then you do 1 4-hour summer class, you would finish in exactly 3 years, which is exciting. You do 18, 18, 4, 18, 18, 4, 18, 18, 4. You have 120 hours to graduate. So, and that's doing this sheet big time fast. I should have a copy of it. You all have your own personal copy of this again? That's the most important thing you can, because again, if you do it in 3.5 years, you can still graduate early. Cut you out a year of graduate school. And that's the gist of it. So that's all I have for today. I know I'm giving you some time to work on your stuff if you need to. Or to take a break and do self-care if you need to.